So, we don't talk about this sort of thing on The Daryl Johnson Show, except today. This will be my personal ranking of the existing episodes of Netflix's Black Mirror series as of spring 2020 #COVID-19. Disclaimers. I won't be thorough, but there will be spoilers heretofore. This will only include the released episodes, which up until now includes episodes 1 through 23. If you haven't watched Black Mirror, this video will have little relevance to you, so click away or whatever. Finally, if you haven't watched Black Mirror, I don't necessarily recommend that you start. The series can be interesting, thought-provoking, and novel. It can also be dark, disturbing, unnerving, and outright perverse. I myself got into it after a friend blindsided me with the first episode, and I continued the series on a shocked train wreck of a wave. So if you've watched the series, maybe you'll enjoy my ranking. If you haven't watched it, maybe don't. Enjoy the sunshine of life. Moving on, to help quantize my listing, I'm sharing 5 scales that influenced my opinion of each episode. The first is the plot/concept. This is however I felt about the overall idea. The next is likability, how much I enjoyed watching it. Meaning, how much meaning was embedded in the episode, how thought-provoking it was, including any learnings or pertinent warnings, etc. Feeling, how much emotion it infused, did it make me feel something? And finally, the ending. If you've watched a few of these episodes, you know that the endings are especially notable and often dramatically reshape your experience of the episode. Each category is ranked on a scale of 1 to 5. Additionally, I've included an extra category that I've labeled the dark scale. This refers to just how dark the episode was, and they all are at least a little bittersweet, with the possible exception of my number 2 pick, and so I've graded them on a scale of 1 to 5 based on just how dark that episode gets. So let's begin with number 23, Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2. This was a pretty clear loser for me. Dull, cliche, and cheesy. I just couldn't get with this one despite the fact that it starred Miley Cyrus, which I thought was a nice idea on paper. The plot was a 1 because it came off like a slightly adulterated after-school Disney Channel special. Basically, a child star is forced to produce bubblegum pop and be a squeaky clean commercial icon, but no, she wants to be a bad girl instead, so she rebels until she can release the flowers in her heart. I gave it a 2 for meaning because it carried the low-hanging revelations about the pop music industry being overbearing and constrictive. Not new or interesting, but it is something, so I gave it a 2. And I felt nothing, so a 1 there. The ending was as cheesy as this sort of thing gets, with its grayish version of a happy ending. At the end of the day, it wasn't too dark or twisted, so I gave it a dark scale of 2 for its gloomy storyline and depictions of abuse, but otherwise moderated timbre. Number 22, The Waldo Moment. It was just a little too ridiculous and nobody was likable. Some guy creates this vulgar digital cartoon character to satirize the political scene. Then this absurd cartoon somehow enters the race to run for a political office while its creator puppets the character from offstage during debates with other human candidates. Then the guy gets a crisis of conscience and tries to kill the character, but his superiors fire him and use the character to take over the world. So, I gave it a 2 for plot because it's unbelievable and bizarre in a non-compelling way, a 1 for likability because I did not enjoy watching for the most part, and 2 for meaning for its commentary on cult of personality leaders, and a 1 for feeling because I felt nothing beyond a little irritation toward the protagonist for being so annoying, and a 1 for the ending because it was not interesting, funny, challenging, moving, provocative, or anything other than something that elicits this facial response. Number 21, Metalhead. The upside to Metalhead is that it had me on the edge of my seat the entire episode, and the drama and horror were effective. The problem was that it had no plot or meaning. Where is this woman? Why is she risking her life for teddy bears? Why are there killer dogs running around killing humans? What is the point? What is the message? There really was no depth to the story. Well shot, well acted, well produced, but at the end of the day, it was anxiety for anxiety's sake, with a grim and perplexing conclusion. I gave it a 3 on the dark scale because it's a horror-type flick built on intensity, thrill, and dread, but it's not depraved or overly gruesome or twisted. Number 20, Bandersnatch. This episode was obviously unique because it has the interactive element that allows you to choose your ending, etc. So I gave this episode 100% for creativity, innovation, novelty, and intrigue, and I think it's a success for these reasons alone. However, these elements prevailed at the expense of the meaning and story. As a result, I finished the experience with a confusion and uncertainty about what had actually happened, what the point was, and wondering what I missed by not selecting other options. So I left congratulating the creators on a deeply complex project well done, but void of any thoughts or feelings regarding the purpose of the story. It gets a 3 on the dark scale for its exploration of the dark side of mental illness. Number 19, 15 million merits. Here we find everyone trapped in a futuristic and depressing scenario where everyone spends their life earning points called merits. When you have 15 million of them, you go on this American Idol-style talent show where you can display your talents. If you win, you can improve your lot in life. Otherwise, you remain in this rat race where you just exercise all day and watch TV screens. This episode is okay, but I didn't love it because it's slow, dreary, and the meaning just wasn't there for me to justify the time it took to watch it. Plus, the dim futuristic aesthetics gave it a bleak, claustrophobic mood that I didn't care to experience for that length of time and for that particular payoff. Number 18, Black Museum. In this episode, a teenage or 20-something-year-old girl visits a museum of horrors. She gets a private tour from the owner who tells her the chilling tales of how each of the artifacts brought pain, misery, or tragedy to their owners throughout history. In the end, it turns out that our protagonist wasn't just visiting such a morose museum out of random interest in these artifacts. She actually had a score to settle with a tour guide who'd used one of these museum artifacts himself to torture her father in the past. So she turns the tables and sets him up for an eternity of torture in a very Black Mirror sort of way. I gave this a 3 for plot because the story was interesting enough, a 2 for likability because it was mired with dark, gruesome stories that make it tough to simply enjoy, a 2 for meaning because it mainly came off as an eye for an eye situation where the protagonist sticks it to racism by doing the same thing back to other people. Thus, there wasn't much redemption for all the suffering that we had to witness throughout this episode, as it led to an intriguingly shocking twist with a dark, empty ending. If you've watched the series, you know that these kinds of endings are hallmarks of the show, but it doesn't mean that I have to like it. Many who watch this episode leave with a feeling of satisfaction with the excruciating revenge narrative, but that just doesn't do it for me. I've rated the dark scale at 5 for back-to-back-to-back incidences of torment, cruelty, and death. Number 17, Men Against Fire. The final act of this episode reveals that the most counterproductive aspect of being a wartime soldier is the ability to recognize the humanity of your enemy. So by embedding the soldiers with a software that hijacks their senses, the military overlords are able to send troops to genocide a race of people by using the implant to display the enemies as zombie-like beasts in the mind of the soldiers. Unfortunately, or fortunately, our protagonist's implant malfunctions and he learns that he's been killing actual humans and not subhuman monsters. So now he has a choice to make as to whether he can continue with this mission. My scores for plot, likability, and meaning reflect a decent story making a decent point. However, there simply wasn't enough development for me to invest emotionally, and as a result, I appreciated the episode, but it didn't move me, and I would have liked a lot more from the ending in terms of closure and clarification. It's a 4 on the dark scale because the subject and drama is based entirely on hunting, killing, and psychological manipulation. But it's not as dark as this series gets. Number 16, Playtest. The arc of Playtest resembles a balloon slowly filling with helium, bigger, wider, and higher. Just as the tension and anxiety stretches you to your ends, it pops and leaves you shocked, empty, and mortified. And then the credits roll. I've given Playtest such low scores because the anticlimactic ending totally invalidates all of the interest it built up leading to it. The viewer is left staring at the screen thinking, and that's it? It's a 4 on the dark scale for its emphasis on psychological fear and trauma that resolves to tragedy. Number 15, The National Anthem. This really is the epitome of a Black Mirror episode and makes an appropriate first episode of the series. In a way, I struggled to rate this one because it scores in every category on each extreme end. The episode is bizarre, funny, absurd, shocking, dramatic, unbelievable, lurid, macabre, gut-wrenching, and perverted. The waves of each emotion oscillate until it leaves the viewer once again broken, horrified, and disgusted, trying to figure out why anyone would ever want to watch a show that would make them feel like this. This episode is about a disaffected hacker who kidnaps a royal and publicly announces that he will kill her if the Prime Minister of England does not perform an obscene act with a pig. It begins humorously and ends horrifically. I've ranked it as high as I have because on the one hand, it did indeed make me feel something, and something strong at that, which is a prized novelty for me, but I ranked it as low as I have because I did not like what it made me feel. The 5 on the dark scale refers not to a violent, gruesome, or somber darkness, but to a shocking, morally depraved darkness. Up until this point, we've covered episodes that I haven't particularly cared for. Smithereens at number 15 begins the bridge episodes, the episodes that I neither disliked nor liked. I've given Smithereens relatively low ratings not because it was badly written, filmed, performed, because it wasn't. It was a fine film. The main reason for the low ratings was that it was just a basic kidnapping, high-speed chase and shootout with the villain delivering his impassioned explanation right before the end. There were some social commentaries to be made about the role of social media in our lives, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a true Black Mirror offering. It was a basic drama with a heavy-handed, don't text while driving PSA slapped on the end. As a result, meh. Number 13. Be Right Back. Here, a woman loses her husband, and out of grief she orders a robot human that is fashioned to look like her husband and talk like her husband using data mined from his social media accounts from when he was alive. It ultimately shows the brief joy she receives from this mock-up and follows it as it dissolves into an unsettling repulsion. Many found this episode to be gripping and poignant. I thought it was an interesting idea, but I left more with feelings of discomfort and eeriness. It really is a good concept, but the slow pacing and creepy disposition make it less compelling for me. Number 12. White Christmas. Like Black Museum, White Christmas is told through a series of vignettes. Of course, every story is dark. And while there does not emerge any one grand lesson or meaning, I enjoyed it because it was an interesting exercise in what if. What if you could block people in real life? What if our criminal justice system could apply mind-raping investigation tactics? What if we could be punished in such gratingly neutral eternities? As you can see, I gave this one 3s across the board. White Christmas retains its rank less because of what it did right and more because of what it didn't get wrong. It's a good story, sufficiently intriguing, and they didn't drop the ball on the ending. Well, at least not beyond what you would expect from the series. This is a moderately dark piece, but not unmanageably so. Number 11. Crocodile. Crocodile is a true Black Mirror episode, a truly horrific version of The Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. The story follows a desperately distressed but oddly sympathetic woman who becomes an overnight serial killer in a depraved attempt to preserve her life so that it doesn't fall prey to a dark secret from her youth. The problem with Crocodile is that it plunges into the depths of horror and cruelty. But I placed it at the top half because the setting is captivating, having been shot in Iceland, and the story is so well constructed and manages to keep the protagonist's humanity intact and sympathetic, even as she degrades into the worst that mankind has to offer. The story begins at a level 3 darkness and ends at a horrifying 5. Breaking into the top 10, Archangel. The reality of the modern Western mindset is that everyone wants to believe that we can expect perfection from life, that safety comes first in all things, and anything we can do to give our children a perfectly supervised, filtered, and curated life is a necessary step in raising them. In this episode, a new mother participates in a test program that allows her to implant a device in her daughter's brain that allows her to see everything her child sees via a transmission to an iPad that also allows her mother to block the child from seeing or hearing anything distressing, and also measures her vitals and all of that stuff. The mother eventually comes to the conclusion that this kind of surveillance is doing more harm than good, so she packs up the iPad and decides to let her daughter live a normal, unmonitored life. But once her daughter hits high school, that gnawing need to know consumes her, and the story spirals into a classic Black Mirror ending. The execution of this idea could have been more explorational, but I rated it highly because the concept is particularly apt with the advent of RFID chips and the like. I think we can get a pretty chillingly accurate picture of the future to think about through Archangel. Beginning about here, we've reached the other side of the bridge, and these coming episodes are episodes I would say I genuinely liked. However, remember that the term like takes on a different meaning when it comes to Black Mirror. Number 9. Nosedive. The greatest part of Nosedive was the distressing possibility of this episode becoming reality. It features a protagonist making her way through a futuristic world where people rate each other in real time 24/7 with their cell phones based on every interaction they have with each other. Our upwardly mobile protagonist faces the opportunity to reach the highest rungs of social credit until a series of frustrating setbacks send her into a spectacular nosedive. I really liked the message and the setting. The only reason I didn't rate it higher is because I didn't feel this episode as strongly as some of the others, and the novelty of some of the upcoming subjects interested me a little bit more. Plus, the ending was... I don't know. Number 8. Hated in the Nation. Hated in the Nation struck a perfect balance for this series in that it was sufficiently interesting, fresh, and innovative without devolving into gratuitous shock and trauma. It deals with a mostly off-camera villain who unleashes his vendetta against society by orchestrating a daily murder based on the unlucky winner of a daily social media poll, with a planned endgame that would result in the mass murder of hundreds of thousands of heartless keyboard commandos. It is Black Mirror, so the episode is dark, but as I mentioned, it's not excessive and it's no more so than a standard police thriller. The episode's meaning is not necessarily brilliant or unique, but it is apt and legitimate nonetheless. I might have preferred a more conclusive ending, but it was conclusive enough and the story was very solid. Number 7. Striking Vipers. This one, I really don't know what to say. I'm trying to think about what to say, but basically, there's this husband and a wife. Sometime during the episode, the husband gets a hold of an Asian virtual reality fighting game that starts out like Street Fighter, but ends very differently. Eventually, the wife finds out about this unorthodox game, and all the disturbing cards of the situation end up on the table. But it does not destroy their marriage. Instead, the story takes another twist and ends in an altogether unpredictable manner. This episode is not especially dark beyond the evening setting that so much of it takes place in. I give it points for novelty, restraint, realism, and interest. Number 6. USS Callister. The USS Callister very transparently adopts the Star Trek affect to create a scenario where a seemingly joyous cast of space wanderers is found to be a captive band of victims serving at the behest of a sociopathic cyber nerd. This episode is unique on my list in that it arrives near the top of the list despite the fact that the plot is not especially brilliant, and while there are passing satirical references, there appears to be minimal meaning overall. This one holds its own with the sheer pull of its style. It's fun and interesting to watch this blackened recreation of the television classic come to life within the deranged, ever-skewing world of Black Mirror. The characters are good, the setting is great, and it was an interesting ride. I would have preferred a different ending, but I can deal with this one. Number 5. The Entire History of You. This is basically a Black Mirror take on a romantic drama. Using a futuristic technology that records everyone's life memories like a dashcam, a husband, tortured by jealousy over his wife, chases the technological trail of his suspicions to its inevitable conclusion. I rate this one highly for its engaging drama, effective use of sci-futuristic technology, and weight. This wasn't a mind-twisting kind of journey, but it was interesting and cleverly revealed. When I mentioned earlier that my definition of like takes on a different meaning when referring to this series, these next two selections exemplify that perfectly. Number 4. White Bear. After watching this one, I was grieved for days. The darkness of this episode manifests in its grim reality and stunning ending. Much like Crocodile, it follows a beleaguered protagonist through a staggering descent. In Crocodile, reality amasses like a swelling snowball, but in the case of White Bear, reality hits with an instantaneous jarring of a ton of bricks. Though I was grieved and depressed by this episode, I like it because it was able to make me feel so deeply for this character, and because it displayed invisible flaws of humanity that need to be exposed and revealed for what they are. This was a powerful storyline with a masterful ending, and the best use of credits in the entire series. Number 3. Shut Up and Dance. A sister episode of sorts to White Bear, Shut Up and Dance seduces the viewer with an intoxicating cocktail of desperation, shame, and mystery. Unseen hackers collect devastating information on the protagonist and force him into a web of crime along with a cast of terrified victims with secrets of their own. Dangling the hope of escape, this one leads down one of the darkest rabbit trails the series has to offer, terminating in a desolate conclusion that reveals the sordid sickness of our protagonist. This episode has been criticized as a needless exercise in sadism, and while it's true that this episode runs short on philosophy and higher meaning, I ranked it at number 3 because the storyline is clever, the emotion is palpable, the twists are unpredictable, and it's a powerful story that humanizes the origin of such a person as our protagonist, who would be considered amongst the most accursed in our modern society. Number 2, Hang the DJ. Despite the name, this was a very sunny diversion. In a seemingly real-life world, couples are matched together in hopes of finding their soulmate. The primary catch is that they only have a random, preset amount of time with each other before they are randomly reassigned to new partners. The chemistry of the two leads is excellent as they fight to thwart the system. It's a fun, romantic, and compelling episode, with my only complaint being a fast and somewhat difficult to decipher ending. It took a lot of internet research for me to finally understand the last 3 or 4 minutes. But it was relieving to watch an episode that just felt good, and it was really the only episode without an undercurrent of disappointment. Great plot, very likable, great feeling, not dark at all. I like it. And coming in at number 1, San Junipero. While many episodes are ranked with wild variation depending on who is making the list, San Junipero enjoys the distinction of ranking in the top 5 of almost everyone's list. I was swept away with the development of the plot, the feel-good nostalgia of the 80s and 90s themes, the bittersweet twist, and the message of Carpe Diem implicit in the message. For me, this episode packed the strongest emotional punch because we're only young once, and I was struck by the beautiful urgency conveyed through this story. The plot and concept are fresh and very good. The likability is not just Black Mirror likable, it stands up to anything. The life and death meaning of it infused it with a heartfelt romantic feeling, and the ending did not disappoint as likely would be expected from this series. It is slightly dark due to the realities that come to light as the episode progresses, but it's a brilliant melancholy darkness that makes the light shine that much more brightly. There are talks of another Black Mirror season coming soon. I don't know what they have in store, but for now, I called it as I saw it. Stay safe out there, guys.